One of the challenge areas that we always see is relating to utility invoices. So that's gas, power, phone, internet. And that can be a challenge in following that from the end to end. How are you getting those invoices? Are you waiting for them to come 2 weeks later in the mail? Or do you have to go and log in to an online portal and spend minutes downloading an invoice? And that on its own may not be that bad, but what if you have 100, 500, 1,000 of those types of invoices? How long is that taking your team?
Thank you for being with us every day on the Real Estate Syndication Show. I've got a gift for you, but I want to ask that you will leave a written rating and review on iTunes. If you'll send a screenshot to info@LifeBridge Capital of that review and a mailing address, I want to send you one of my recommended monthly books. This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Our guest today, Braedon Hebert, he spent the first part of his career at a Big Four accounting firm and in finance at Canada's second largest telecom and media company. He left the safe path to pursue his passions for technology and entrepreneurship to become an operations and finance leader in the Toronto tech startup world. So he and a co-founder created Condo Works, an adventure of their own now, but combining his knowledge of finance and growing in real estate market, you're helping management companies and helping operators to automate the AP process, right? And the invoicing process. And you're going to hear a lot about, well, what is AP, accounts payable, and why should you care about that? But as operators, and you're going to hear he and I talk about this in the show, you need to find these places in your business or processes that are not as efficient as they could be, right? And this is often one of those parts of our business in many real estate businesses that they're still operating like they were 20 years ago. And it's hard to believe that, but it's true. Oftentimes this part of the process or the bookkeeping part of the business, accounts payable, invoicing, what's coming in and out, is still operating like it was 20, 30 years ago. And so he's going to talk through that process a little bit today and how this software can help, but also just some things for you to think about. Whether you use a software like this or not, you should really consider, and how much time is our team spending on this, right? Are they still operating like they were 20 years ago? Because I know me personally, I'm not involved in that process, thank the Lord, every day. But it made me think about, well, how is our team doing that? Right. And I may ask some questions next time we're together as a team about, how are these things done now that I've heard this on the show? And I'm hoping you will as well. And it will help you to improve these processes and in turn, create more time for you so you can focus, as that leader, that operator or past investor, you can focus on the things that are highest impact for you. Right. And oftentimes it's not invoicing, but you could still be looking at those things or doing those things. And I know numerous operators that have grown their portfolio over many years and they are still doing those things. But I know you are going to learn a lot from Braedon in our conversation today. Braedon, welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to diving into this thing that you've created that's helping operators in our space and automating, right? Part of the process that's so important in managing any business really, but specifically ours as well. But let the listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what Condo Works is.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks a lot for having me. My name's Braedon Hebert. I'm one of the co-founders of Condo Works, which is an accounts payable automation platform that's built specifically for property management companies. So it's designed to help take the pain out of what can be oftentimes a painful process of receiving, processing, recording, and paying invoices.
Yeah, no doubt it can be a painful process. As we brought management in-house, over this past year, we've had to change that process in a big way. I feel like our old management company, they were still doing it often the way they were probably doing it 20 years ago, still doing it that way. And so when we brought it all in-house and applied a bunch of tech to it, man, it changed how we do things in a big way and improved them. And this is definitely something that if somebody doesn't have it automated to some degree, they're probably wasting a lot of time that could be spent on other things. But dive into just that, Braedon, a little bit about accounts payable and even the automation piece. What is accounts payable? Why should we care about that?
Sure. Yes. To break it down, there's a few core components of any financial operations. There's the accounting and bookkeeping aspect of it, but two main inputs are the accounts receivable and the accounts payable. So accounts receivable being the receipt of cash, whether it's monthly HOA fees or rental payments. And then the accounts payable is the outflow of cash and the paying of bills and invoices. Yeah. And so, like you said, a lot of companies are, I like to say, still in the mid 90s in terms of how they are doing that part of their back office operations. So I like to measure how many fax numbers I still see in email signatures, and it's still high, especially in this industry. And so I think a lot of times it works. Like it's oftentimes we see it's an area that they know is old, but it still works. So they're kind of making do. But there's a lot of benefit that can be had from automating and applying efficiencies to that. And so we break down the AP cycle into four main parts of it. There's the receiving of invoices. There's the coding and approval of those invoices. There's the posting or recording into the accounting or ERP software, and then the payment of those invoices. So that's what we call the end-to-end cycle or the life of an invoice. And so there's ways to apply technology throughout that, and our software looks to apply cutting edge technology and automation throughout that, sprinkled throughout that whole end-to-end flow to make the process much more efficient, less time, less dollars spent on that whole operation.
Speak to maybe some of the ways that you see people doing this now that are not automated, right? Kind of how what's the hassle factor here of this whole process? For most management companies, or even think about people who are. Maybe we can get into this a little bit, but who self-manage and and are having to manage all this for a number of units, and the time spent to just own that blows my mind a little bit. But how have people? I guess what's the most up-to-date version of this process without automating it? Maybe that you see, and maybe the typical amount of time people are having to spend on this.
Sure, that's actually the genesis of CondoWorks. So my co-founder, he's the technical guy who built the product, but he was the treasurer on his HOA board or condo board in Ontario, which is where we're based out of, and he observed there a very old school way of the receiving a paper invoice on site, mailing it to the head office, someone stamping it, someone signing off approval, someone entering it by hand into the accounting system. And then every other week, the check run takes place, stack of checks get printed. And then he, as the treasurer on his board, had to be the one to sign that. So those checks got sent back to him on site at the property. He signed the big stack of checks, sent back to the head office, and then finally mailed out to the vendor. And so the average cycle time there was, it can be up to eight weeks for an invoice to be paid, and studies show that the internal cost can be $10 to $15 per invoice. So imagine if you get a $10 invoice to pay, it's going to cost a company like that more in the paper and stamps and internal costs than it is to actually pay that invoice. And one of the things that we see that is unique to property management compared to any business can be things like there can be a high invoice volume. The business is distributed, and so you'll have multiple sites, typically within a certain geographic area. But you'll have your head office, which is separate from all the building sites, as well as multiple stakeholders, whether it's board owners or boards, tenants, owners, vendors. And then the accounting and bookkeeping operations aren't necessarily complex from a accounting guideline standpoint, but they're operationally complex because you have high invoice volume, but also oftentimes the need to keep discrete financial records across the different properties. So if you're managing hundreds of properties, that may require the need to have hundreds of different sets of books. And so not only are you dealing with a high volume with multiple stakeholders, you need to, accuracy is of the utmost important to make sure that invoice is recorded properly, but also into the right entity in your accounting system.
Yeah.
So, in spite of all that, a lot of these management companies are still, like I said, stuck in the mid 90s for how they are doing that.
Yeah, I'll give you one story of not having a great process for this. When we took over property management, there was a couple properties that all of a sudden we received some bills for things that were done like 6-8 months prior. maybe even longer in a couple instances. And so all of a sudden we're like, well, wait a minute, were these things actually done? Right. Or is someone just trying to steal some money here ultimately? Right. They see an opportunity here to bill somebody where maybe they don't know if this stuff was done or not. And so, we had to dive into that. Right. And that took quite a bit of time to figure out, hey, were these things actually done or not? Because some of them were kind of bigger ticket items, or expensive, I should say. And so it wasn't like a $10 charge, where some of those it'd be more simple just to pay that than to spend the time on it. Right. However, these were, a few $1,000s. And so it was like, okay, it took time, like I said, from numerous team members then to dive in and figure out, was this actually done? When was this done? How can we prove that it was done? Or was it not, prove that it wasn't done one way or the other before we actually pay this? Because we weren't the ones managing it, when this work was completed. We did own the property though. And so I can't agree with you more about having a great process for, invoicing and understanding that process. But speak to the team members that need to know this process, or where you typically see it work best as far as, is it done at the property level? Is it done in the main office? Is it, how do you see most management companies or operators, where do they house this process? I've seen it done a few different ways.
Yeah, we typically see it at head office, and the involvement across the management company's team can vary. Sometimes it's all done in head office. The accounting or accounts payable team does everything, but oftentimes the managers are also pretty heavily involved in that, because they're the ones who are oftentimes have the vendor relationships, or they're there knowing if repairs need to be made or certain expenses need to be made, and so they're oftentimes involved either in procuring the goods or services, the approval, or oftentimes we see them take it right up to the point before entering it into the accounting system. So they're handling the invoices, they're handling all of the utility invoices. So those are two of the key people. But depending on the size of the company, oftentimes we see like owners, oftentimes pretty hands-on, or they may be the bookkeeper as well. And so what we see is with our customer base, it ranges from companies that may have just like a dozen properties that they manage to hundreds. And the benefits can vary. On a bigger team, you're going to have efficiencies. You have a higher capacity. You can handle if someone's sick. But in the smaller companies, if it's the owner who's playing a part in that bookkeeping, that time is supremely valuable. And so that if we can relieve a portion of that time that's being spent handling invoices and bookkeeping, that's one of those force multiplier things that the owner operator make good use of that extra time.
It is a change of mindset, isn't it? For most owners, especially if you've grown from doing, say, a few smaller properties yourself, and you're doing all those things. And as you grow and grow and grow, then all of a sudden you find yourself often, or I know people, you're still doing the bookkeeping for, 50 properties now, or 50 rentals. And man, it's what you just said. Think about the time spent, now that you're spending on bookkeeping, when you could be spending those hours every week looking for the next properties, right? Or figuring out other ways to make your business operate more efficiently. I love automation like this. And I mean, it's a change of mindset. And oftentimes when we grow, our businesses grow, and hopefully we're growing personally, right? It's hard to change. And so how do you see people approaching this change? Is it scary for most? Is it like, man, I'm ready to dive into this? And maybe you all have created this process where it's easy to implement. Maybe we can chat about that a little bit too.
As an industry, it's not very well known for being on the cutting edge of new things and new technology. It's not necessarily unique in that sense, but it's different. So my background has been in more of technology and selling tech software to tech software companies, and there's a different mindset in that. This will help me. Okay, I'm open to it. In any growing business, you reach that tipping point sometimes where it's like, this has now become a thorn in my side that I can't ignore, and it's time to change. So that's great when we speak to people who are at that point and that are looking for a solution. And of course, then in any sort of sales process, you'll have people who are, this sounds interesting, but I'm not fully convinced. And so with those folks, it's about being able to talk through how they're doing things today and whether there's enough value there in automating that's worth the attention. So any company is going to have competing priorities. And so what do they tackle next? And so what we see oftentimes in the world of technology supporting this industry is that a lot of other areas have been solved. And so, everyone has typically an accounting system. They'll often have a solution on that on the accounts receivable side. So they have a way of easily collecting the rent payments. They may have a tenant or owner facing portal that they'll use, and that solves communication challenges. And so we see oftentimes that accounts payable is kind of one of those things, and is not as widely adopted, but we see it as one of the next open frontiers that will become just part of everyone's tech stack.
Yeah.
And so that's and people are kind of at different stages along that.
I want to jump
journey.
into like what Condo Works is a little bit and who it's for, some of those things. But just before we do that, is there a good way that you found for operators to measure the time, or money spent on that invoicing process now? I feel like that would be helpful, like for us to think through, right, before we invest in even a product like this, or really to help them. I was thinking about those people too, who, it's just difficult to make the change, right? You want to do it the way you've always done it. But man, if you could measure that process to say, okay, it's taking this many hours a week. I know it's, you could just write down how many hours you personally are doing it, but I was even thinking about larger teams. Thinking about the investment or, spent on a weekly basis by your team may help somebody to make that mind shift faster to, this is going to save us that much time or that much money.
Yes, it can be difficult to catalog everything if you're not doing it yourself, and you may not have time to shadow the team just to get a feel for it. If you're now further removed, say you may have started doing it yourself and then you hand it off, and all of a sudden you have a team of 3 people to 10 people on that team. You may have lost that touch just to know what's really happening. What I find helpful is to, if you can't shadow, at least walk through in granular steps what it takes. And so one of the challenge areas that we always see is relating to utility invoices. So that's gas, power, phone, internet. And that can be a challenge in following that from the end to end. So how are you getting those invoices? Are you waiting for them to come 2 weeks later in the mail? Or do you have to go and log in to an online portal and spend minutes downloading an invoice? And that on its own may not be that bad, but what if you have 100, 500, 1,000 of those types of invoices? How long is that taking your team? From there, how many touches does it have? Who else is handling it? As a property manager, is the accounting? Is there an owner who's touching it? And then how long does it take to get paid? So from start to finish. And so you don't necessarily need to follow one in real time, but you can recreate those steps. And we find asking the detailed questions. You can describe that sometimes quickly. And you say, oh yeah, we get the invoice, we record it, and we pay it. Oh, easy. But how do you get it? So what happens next? How does it get recorded? And then how does it get paid? And asking those detailed questions. But and it can be hard. We've monitored for studies, and I think I mentioned the internal cost of $10 to $15 per invoice. So that can be a kind of a proxy. How many invoices do you have times $10 to $15, and if you can reduce that by 75%, how valuable is that to you?
Yeah, reduce it by 75%. That's drastic, right? I mean, that's so valuable, right? That time for you and your team, but figuring some of that out, man, can help you make the switch faster. I think if you knew you could save that kind of time. So, speak to Condo Works specifically. Who is this for exactly? Who's your ideal client? Who's the smallest guy to the largest guy this would work for, and some of those things.
Condo Works is our name. So we're giving away a couple of things. So one is where we got our start, which is in condos. And I usually get given away between process versus process as my Canadian roots. And so in Canada, condo is kind of the catch-all term for any sort of HOA or community. And that's where we got our start. That was the genesis, my co-founder being on his condo board. But our goal has grown to be more broadly for property management companies more holistically. And so whether that's HOA, residential, or commercial management companies, we find that within residential, multifamily is oftentimes a strong fit just in terms of the volume and consistency of invoicing, and same with commercial. So we're building a solution for those types of companies that's focused on the accounts payable process specifically. And so we are a complement, and we integrate with the existing accounting or ERP platform. So we're not looking to replace that, but to enhance that, and as well as the team's operations to be able to make specifically the accounts payable process more efficient. And that's done with what we call a tech first, or a true automation, which looks to leverage modern technology throughout that whole flow.
So a user should already have some type of, say, property management software they're using and that this would integrate with.
Yes, yeah. Like we integrate with, there's going to be 9 different property management platforms, and we're adding integrations as they come up. So it's definitely a complement to the existing platform.
What's different about CondoWorks versus other software solutions? Maybe you can provide a few details there that would be valuable to listeners.
Sure. Yes, I think so. Going back to that tech first mindset, that manifests itself throughout that whole flow. So a core component is using AI tools to extract data off of an invoice automatically. So we take a digital copy of an invoice, and our system will recognize key data points such as invoice number, date, and amount automatically within minutes. And so some other platforms, they'll offer automation, but they're really kind of more of an outsourced solution where they have a team that will look at each invoice, and it may take a day or two for the other platform to be able to have an invoice, versus most of ours will get processed within 2 minutes. Another key component, I spoke earlier about the pain of utility invoices. So on the invoice ingestion side, we've built integrations now with over 250 different e-billing portals, and we will automatically download any new invoices that get posted to the e-billing portal. So not only is that saving a ton of time, but especially if you're getting, say, those invoices today on paper and they're not on auto pay, a lot of times that can result in getting those invoices rushed and expedited, so that you're not getting shut off notices or late fees on those invoices. So by having that automatically downloaded, not only like those invoices will speed through the platform, no one likes dealing with utility companies or utility invoices. And so that's a big pain that we can relieve leveraging technology. And that's a key feature for us, is how we handle utility invoices specifically.
Okay. That's interesting that it can scan it and pull that data out that fast, right? That's definitely saves a ton of time. I just love too the promptness. I just think it says a lot, about paying bills on time and early and those things. I love that, speeding that process up and accuracy as well. But what about some trends that maybe listeners should be prepared for over the next year that you could help with?
I think that there is a gradual adoption of technology. I think worldwide that's happening, but I think in the world of property management and real estate, it's become an area of focus, I think, for a lot of companies as well as providers and new entrants to the market. And so there's a lot of new technology, new companies being funded, a lot of acquisition happening in this space. I think people see that there's a lot of potential value that can be brought to this industry through technology. So I think that's something that's been kind of happening, but will continue to accelerate over the next couple of years. And the other trend is related, but moving more so to electronic paperless everything. So the stat that we quote is that 42% of payments in the US are still made by check, which is quite high. And so the advantages of moving that to electronic forms of payment, not only are you paying faster, it's also way more secure. And I was just talking to a client of ours. They had a situation where their checks were intercepted and they had fraud, and someone had recreated one of their clients' checks, and luckily their accounting team caught it very quickly through their month-end bank reconciliation process. But some people like to feel the cold hard paper in their hand, and my signature is safer and more secure, but it's actually quite less secure than other forms of electronic payment. So
let me get this straight. CondoWorks, so you're going to scan that invoice, it's going to see those things. It's going to, but you're paying it through that platform as well. Is that right?
So payment can be approved and issued via our platform as well. And that form of payment can take different forms. So that can be ACH or direct deposit. If a vendor accepts credit card, that can be that payment can be issued via card. And then we also still do, if a vendor requires a check in our setup, we'll capture the electronic signature of those who have signing authority. And a check can be printed and mailed to those vendors. So that is still an option for those vendors that aren't quite there yet.
All right, Braedon, a few questions, just final questions for you that I love getting to and hearing from different people. But what about the biggest challenge you're facing in your business right now?
Our biggest challenge has been, and probably will always be, on the implementation part of our operation. So we will go through a sales process. Customers they'll be bought in, but then in order to properly implement a solution like ours, it takes time and attention of our customers to be able to implement it. So we aim to do as much as we possibly can, but it will still take certain, prioritization amongst our customers to implement this across the portfolio of products that they have, as well as the functionality of our software. So there is real time and cost savings that come from a solution like ours. It can sometimes just be hard to prioritize that given everyone's juggling so many other things. And so we aim to do as much as we can, and we're constantly refining our supporting materials and project plans. But that is, like I said, has been and will probably always be operationally one of our number one challenges, the implementation and onboarding side of things.
I believe that. And that's one reason too, I ask about how you measure, someone can measure how this is going to benefit them. Because when I can see how much it's going to benefit us, then I can get motivated about putting that time in right now, right, to make that happen. But what's some of the most important metrics that you track? Could be personally or professionally.
So related to that, what that implementation side, we track the percentage, how implemented are we amongst our customers. And so that's a function of how many properties they have, where we rolled out to, as well as functionality. So that's key, because it's for us, that's obviously it's tied to revenue for us, so it's important, but it's also time to value amongst our customers. Another really important aspect, even though we're a tech solution and software, the customer support and service is like we see as a key differentiator for us. And so we measure that. We actually have that built into our software, where we're constantly getting feedback from our users as to whether they like us or don't like us. And so that's monitoring that is important, but also following up and actioning any feedback that we do receive. That's been a more recent change, but it's been one that we said, man, I wish we did this 2 years ago.
How are you collecting that?
We built it into our software. So once a user does a defined set of actions, a modal will pop up and says, do you like CondoWorks? And then depending on on a scale of 1 to 10. So then depending on their response, that may either say, great, leave us a review, or ouch, can I give you a call? So yeah, I've had a couple of calls this week from people that gave us harsh but fair feedback. And so that's really important. We may not have heard that if we hadn't put that into luckily we have a team that can just whip that up and put that into our software. But I think it's an important thing, regardless of whether you're a software solution or any business, that getting that feedback, there's lots of solutions out there that can make that easy to capture. And it's super, super valuable information.
That is super valuable. I've been reading lately and learning about Net Promoter Score. Have you ever heard of that?
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Exactly what it is.
I thought that's what it sounded like. It's interesting to hear how valuable, you all found it to be, because I'm trying to figure out how to implement that in our business as well. Because it's great feedback, right? Even if it's poor, it is like you need to hear it so you can make corrections and fix things.
Yeah. So you're asking a customer on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you recommend CondoWorks to a friend or colleague? And the scoring system that is standard it's a tough scoring system. If you get a 9 or 10, you get points, but if you get, I think, 7 and below, you lose points.
That's right.
It's a tough metric, but it really does motivate you as the person providing that service to aim for those 9s and 10s, which I think that has to be the goal. Now, you're not aiming for a 7 or a 6. You're aiming for a 10.
Yeah, I think they consider 7 and 8s passive, and like 0 or 1 through 5s are detractors. Think about that. Those are people who are actually doing you harm, right? And so they do have a way to calculate that. I mean, you all actually calculate the score that, like, it tells you? I think you take the percentage of the 1 through 5s and the percentages of the 9 and 10s. You subtract on the 1 and 5s. Somehow you get that score, that percentage. Is that how you all measure that?
Yeah. And we have a dashboard that has a real-time tally of that score, and then the by user details, so that if we do see somebody that is critical, that who are they, where are they coming from, we can see what they did more recently. And sometimes they'll leave additional feedback, but sometimes not. And so that's a way that we can then reach out to gather some more information if needed.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up. What about some habits that you have that you are disciplined about that produce the highest return for you?
Personally, I have found the benefits of exercise. I try to do that every morning during the week. I don't notice it when I'm doing it, but if I skip a day or skip a couple of days, that I say, oh, wow, I'm more sluggish today, or I'm not as sharp. So I have found that has personally helped me. And I also think that nothing's a greater forcing function on prioritization than children. I don't know if that's a hack or maybe it's an anti-hack, but that has definitely helped focus as well as time box work versus non-work. Yeah, sometimes it feels like for better or for worse, but it's definitely helped at least to be able to set up, okay, this is school get ready time, this is bedtime, and I have to get everything else done in these fixed time periods. So there's nothing like constraints to help focus you.
Yeah, for sure. Braedon, how do you like to give back?
Personally, there's things that I like to do in different organizations that I do, like youth and adolescent mental health. It's a focus of mine, at least personally, on that. We're young in terms of our company. And so what we're trying to do is, what is our mission and how do we best articulate that to focus on something that will get us to where we want to go? And so as a company, our goal is to reduce the pain of accounts payable. That's sort of our product. But I think we also see as an industry, property management, it's tough. You're dealing with people, and that inevitably leads to challenges and complicated situations. And so if we're able to help our customers make a part of their operations more efficient, they don't need to worry about that as much. And they can focus on more important things to them, which is dealing with their clients and all of the other messy situations that can happen in the world of property management. So that's what we're trying to articulate, kind of to elevate our company's perspective beyond just, hey, we can make you save time and money on your accounts payable. It's about being able to make everything more efficient so that you can then provide better service to your clients.
Awesome. Braedon, pleasure to meet you and have you on the show and to dive into accounts payable, right? What is that? But ultimately, instead of seeing it something like that, like listeners to think through, hey, how much time are you spending on this? How much time is your team or your management company spending on this thing, invoicing and thinking through that process? Oftentimes the owner, I feel like too, it can be pretty removed from that process. And even something like this could help me to think about, hey, maybe I need to go figure out how this process is even done, ensuring we are doing it like as efficiently as possible, or thinking about something like Condo Works, and maybe that could save us 50% of our time spent on that, or 75. I mean, think about that, right? How many hours a week? I don't know how many properties somebody has. It could be massive savings in time, or time, obviously that could be focused on something else, right? And so grateful to just really bringing that to our attention, thinking through that. Even your all's desire. I love things like this that come up to you unexpected, how you get feedback, right? And the importance of that feedback. I love that you all have that desire to continue to improve like that. I know that's the type of businesses and software or what tech that we want to use, right? And just like other operators that I want to invest with. So I want to know that they care about feedback from investors just like we do, and that they're continually improving, right? Based on that feedback. And that's something I appreciate you sharing also. Braedon, how can listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you and Condo Works?
Yes, so our website's condoworks.co, not .com, but condoworks.co. So that's our website. And our other presence we're most active on is on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me, Braedon Hebert at Condo Works. Our company page is there as well.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.